We are live. I'm Seb 3.0, and today I'm speaking with Josh Lee, aka Dogemos, co-founder of Keplr and Ethereum. And we're going to be talking Ethereum Osmosis, and we're going to be talking about a bunch of stuff today. We're going to be discussing, user experience, how do we get more people to come into Cosmos. Also, kind of getting a state of the Cosmos ecosystem right now, like where we're at, and like what are people building. And I'm also dying to find out why he thinks Diego is the most underrated YouTuber in the Cosmos. Before I get started, though, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and the notification bell to get notified when I do live streams every week. My guest, Dogemos, is coming up next, right here on the Interop. Yeah, so tell me about that time you co-founded Ethereum.
I know, right? A long time ago. Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
man,
there's like 9 different co-founders that I don't even know about Ethereum.
Sometimes my brain just like crosses wires, and I don't even understand why. But yeah, anyway, how you doing?
Doing well. How about you?
Good.
Excited to be here.
Happy to be back home after like what seems like 2 months of just nonstop traveling. Yeah. But yeah, it's been a cool couple of last weeks. We've been I mean, like, obviously there was like Cosmoverse, and then went to Lisbon for a staking summit, and then like went to Dubai to try to raise funds, and yeah, things are like accelerating and moving pretty quickly. So, but at the same time, the ecosystem seems to be like, or like the whole industry seems to be taking a shit on itself. So we'll see how things play out over the next couple of months. Actually, just before getting started here, I was watching this FTX Sam Bankman-Fried thing on like this Wall Street Journal conference they had, and
oh yeah, I saw that.
Oh man, that guy.
Yeah,
it's I don't know. It's almost like it's so cringy just how like just the media is still capturing this person, and like. I don't know.
Well, and that's the crazy part is like I saw that as well, where like it's like, oh, he was joking. It's like, oh, obviously I've had a very rough month, and everyone laughs about it, right? And it's like, and it's like, Sam Bankman-Fried is one thing, but also makes you just wonder, it's like how many of these like very unethical, scammers essentially existed in like the traditional finance world that basically never got discovered because of how they, were so close with the traditional media. Because I feel like Sam is like the first case we see a crypto person that's like so close to mainstream media.
Yeah.
So there you kind of get two stories, right? You get the Twitter version of like a raw, unfiltered, like on-chain version of things that are going on, and then you get to see like how drastically different like the mainstream media coverage is. But like in a lot of the older financial world, you only get to see this like mainstream media coverage of all this, things that blew up. So yeah, it makes you kind of think like, oh my god, how much things have happened that are like people aren't even aware about. So
yeah. It kind of makes you think for a while about like the power structures, and how I mean, really, like what will end up happening to him, I think, will be very dependent on the desires of certain power structures, and also like the influence that he might have. Or I mean, certainly he doesn't have as much influence anymore because he doesn't have any money. But yeah, I mean, maybe there's some corpses in some closets that are keeping him safe. Yeah. So tell me about this Diego guy, because I didn't know about him, and then you mentioned his YouTube channel. You said he was pretty underrated, and I know he's in here. So I just
yeah, I saw this comment here. It just reminded me of I mean I just ran into him on Twitter, and so I actually, before I got into crypto, while I was in college, I majored in video production. So like I really enjoyed like shooting videos and stuff. And things like that. And I know how much work goes into just making some of these videos and things like that. And I saw his stuff and I was like, holy shit, it's like he's just putting a ton of effort into like, making this work and try to explain things. And I'm like, it's also hilarious, right? So it's like I don't know. I feel like Cosmos is all about like the underdog story, where like you kind of start from this like random community dude, and then you just build your way up into like providing people value and building products for people, where you kind of end up having more influence or having more say in, you know, the direction of the community, or the product and things like that. And because, you know, for me, I started off as just like random dude in the community, and now I'm just like building one of the wallets and, you know, all the AMMs, and it's like I don't know. I just saw Diego and I was like, oh my god, this guy just has that like vibe where like I feel like it's gonna get somewhere, and I can't believe how underrated. Like I don't know. Like most Cosmos people don't know him, so um, I just hope he gets
Yeah.
more coverage.
Well, I just subscribed to his channel, so I guess we'll see.
Nice. Yeah.
We'll watch. I'll watch some of it and let you know what I think of it. But yeah, thanks for joining the live stream.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a couple of things here. I mean, like this, like I was saying before, this is probably like the least prep I've ever done for an interview because, yeah, just I feel like we could just have a conversation here, and there's like a bunch of things that we can touch on, and but yeah, maybe off the top, like, what is your sense of where the ecosystem is right now? Like, if you kind of take a snapshot of the Cosmos interchain ecosystem, what's like your sentiment around like you know maybe like people's enthusiasm about where the space is heading? I mean, we just kind of came out of a very complicated Atom 2.0 governance proposal that is like still very much ongoing. There's this like FTX thing that is like dumping on the entire ecosystem, not just Cosmos, but like the whole industry. You know, like 6 months ago, 7 months ago, we had like Luna. There's like all this really kind of not so positive stuff that's either happening, you know, within Cosmos, sort of adjacent to Cosmos, or as a broader industry phenomena. Bullish or bearish?
Yeah, I would say that like 2022, obviously, I don't know. Every year I say it's like, oh, this has been the craziest Cosmos year so far. I think this year more so than the others, just in the context of the entire like industry as well. But yeah, I mean, I'm obviously very bullish on like the interchain and this like app chain thesis. That being said, I think Cosmos has sort of existed traditionally in a very, you know, homogenous culture, very similar minded people who tend to be not the mainstream. Whereas I think this idea of like blockchain interoperability and app chains and a lot of the kind of things that Cosmos in its early days pushed for is actually kind of a mainstream idea now, right? I think this is the first time that's happened, you know, since 2017, which is when I first got into Cosmos. And you know, I have to say, it's like I'm in some ways I'm like really excited that this idea has caught on to the rest of crypto. That being said, it's like I don't know. There's always that like hipster thing where like, hey, it's like, you know, if everyone knows about the cool thing, then like, is it cool anymore? So I mean, there's that like little bit of, you know, the hipster in me where I'm like, oh man, like the good old days when only the people that knew that like IBC was cool, you know, and you could kind of talk hours with them. Whereas like today, it's a completely different landscape, and you actually have a heterogeneous, you know, community of stakeholders and who think different things, which is, you know, a great direction, but it's definitely a different vibe than where things were about, you know, a year or two ago, I would say. You're muted, by the way. So.
Yeah, let's go back to interchain conversations, right? Like summer-ish 2019. The ecosystem was super small. It was basically like the Tendermint team and all the teams that had kind of spun out of that, and like a few other random people that had latched onto this idea, and like, you know, a couple of podcasters. But you know, it was a very small ecosystem that had kind of grown organically from, you know, this core group of people coming from Berkeley, from like the Berkeley blockchain and Berkeley crew, and then there's like the Berlin crew, and then, you know, some folks in Canada, in Toronto. now, now there's like other people that are just people that just kind of show up and start using the tech, and there's tons of teams that have done that. And there's also the like the Luna Terra Luna ecosystem of builders that has started to come into the ecosystem and start building. I mean, I guess they were already building in the interchain, but now they're building products that are, say, closer to products that we typically think of more as as like pure kind of Cosmos things. What do you think the effects of that is in terms of the culture, and where, like, how is the culture shifting in your view?
Um, to say it in a good way, I would say it's become more pragmatic. To say it in a bad way, I would say in some ways I feel like Cosmos sort of. I would say the interchain before it was just like such a group of like-minded people that everyone sort of had this soul, whereas like today it just feels like just any other tech and kind of this like commoditized. It's good, it's good technology, but like I want to see the soul and like that like grit, back,
Yeah,
and kind of miss that,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is, I think, part of growing up. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
if this open source technology is meant for anyone to use and to build on, and like to bring their own ideas and experiences, and and then also that brings users. Credible neutrality also has this property that means that anybody can use it,
Mhm.
and that means that you need to detach. I think one needs to detach themselves from the tech. And you were talking earlier about how or before we were talking here on the show, you said that you felt that the Terra collapsed. As a result of that, there are some well-meaning people that have come in to or are still building in the ecosystem, and there are some like less well-meaning people. And like you look back at the days where it was just like a bunch of friends that were like-minded. Well, you can still have that. It's just like you need to detach yourself from the technology. Just like you're building things like products that are, with like-minded people. You're using like a piece of technology. That doesn't mean that one needs to associate or even endorse what like other people are doing with this technology. The technology is like neutral.
Mhm. Absolutely. And
Yeah.
it's like with the whole Luna thing, I mean, in late 2021 and most of early this year, as one of the co-founders of Keplr, I got a lot of shit for like, why does Keplr not support Terra natively? And some of that was like obviously some like business decisions and technical, but I would say, some of that was just like I just felt like I didn't like Terra as a project very much. And for me, it's always just been like, hey, I build stuff because I enjoy and I believe this thesis. And for me, Terra was not something I could get behind very much. And I tried, as much as I can. I obviously couldn't just one person. So um,
Yeah.
that being said, it's like, do I regret that decision? It's like absolutely not. You know, if Terra was that much more accessible, then maybe there could have been way more money lost than we thought. And just to be clear, I'm based in Korea and I have friends and people that I know around me who worked at TFO, formerly, and I know what that like work environment was like. And that there it wasn't just like the public, how publicly Terra was being shown. It's a lot of the behind the scenes that I was aware of. And yeah, in some ways, I just like I regret that I couldn't speak out just because I felt like and so, hey, Terra is part of this Cosmos community. And
Mm.
after its collapse, I actually, felt more compelled to just, say kind of the unpopular opinions. And that's why I think I actually really enjoy kind of Sunny's idea of meshes, right? Where you can
Mm.
have like the interchain ecosystem, but you can still have different meshes. And not just in the culture, but in a lot of the products and in terms of how security is kind of aligned with like-minded projects that work well each other. I think people and I think one of the big realization was Um, the Atom 1 and like Atom 2.0 discussion was extremely heated. But to be honest, as someone who's been around in Cosmos, like drama is obviously very familiar territory. That being
Yeah.
said, it's like all of us sort of knew that like Cosmos wasn't, a very quiet, peaceful community ever, and you sort of got used to it. But I felt like the discussion just felt really different this time around, uh, compared to kind of the previous dramas where people were still trying to find like constructive outcomes. So I don't know what has changed. It's just that's what growing pains is like. You get a bigger community and you get a lot of vocal people here and there. But I don't know. I'm here to do exactly what I did, 1 year ago, 2 year ago, 3 years ago, and that's just build better products that users can use in the context of Cosmos and the interchain. So yeah, for me, nothing has changed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's been the overwhelming sentiment. Like I said, I was just in Dubai and I was talking to folks there, and they were like, "Oh, like Terra or FTX is really creating bad vibes for the ecosystem, and this is the death of crypto." And I said, like, honestly, most of the people that I interact with were basically just like building, and then like they were like, oh yeah, this FTX thing, all right, and then they just like went back to building. And
Well, and
so
then there's this host of people who are basically, you know, people. There were projects who were simping these potentially, what turned out to be bad actors back then, and then completely flipped 180 once that collapsed, right? And I remember.
yeah.
So, yeah, I I remember that.
Yeah. Speaking of culture, and people wanted me to ask you this. What do you think is the cultural significance of bad kids in the
Yeah.
Cosmos ecosystem?
So here's why I love Bad Kids so much. It basically has all the. For me, I don't know. I don't know if I've never talked to the founder. Personally, never met him. I didn't get any
Are
money
they
from him.
anon or
No, I don't think it's. I don't think he's a non. It's like Portland on
okay?
Discord. Um,
Okay, yeah,
and I heard that he's based in New York, so he's not like I heard people that have met him. I just have never done it before. But like I said, I feel like the culture of Cosmos is, hey, we're small, but we're very like strongly opinionated, and there's this hustler culture. You just kind of like start from the bottom and you make your way up. And I feel like Bad Kids was first of all original. I was just hunting for Stargaze NFTs to mint on a weekend, and I think there were like 8 or 10 different ones, and I just knew that. Like when I saw it, I was like, okay, this is a drawing style. First of all, I haven't seen anywhere else in other ecosystems. So bonus points for that. Secondly, I went to the website and it was like, hey, what's its utility? And then like on the website it says, I have no clue. We just like having bad kids. And I was like, I love that. Like I love that people are honest. And I think, it's like,
yeah,
sure, if you want to try find utilities for NFTs, that's fine. But for me, it's like I like it because I like it. Right. There's so many things in the world that has value where like, hey, what's like the fundamental utility of this painting? It's like, I don't know. I think it looks beautiful, and this other person thinks so as well. And like just being honest about it, I love that part. You can tell the creator put a lot of effort into creating different traits, um, as well as being able to contain a lot of different demographics. That being said, you don't want it to be so fragmented within a PFP collection that like everything else just looks so different, right? Even in like NFTs, you have this like gradient of fungibility, and I think the reason why PFPs tend to be the like kind of extremely financialized NFTs is because it's like you sure have this like gradient of fungibility amongst the collection. And
yeah,
I felt like, for you to be able to build a community, you need to be able to have your own, rarity or like characteristics or traits. But at the same time, you sort of fit in this large gradient of, hey, you're one of this large bad kid. And I felt like
mm.
Bad Kid sort of had a good balance between the two. And then the other kind of thing that I saw was extremely cool was there is this like hidden trait. I don't think anyone's been used making use of it, but like there's brain strength and badness, which is like a trait of these NFTs. Now, I think one of the coolest things about NFTs is you can sort of create derivative works based off of the NFTs itself. So like, hey, what if someone created a game based off of these badness traits or the brains or the strengths of these kids, right? And being able to, it's like I think that shifts what people would want. Like, assuming this game ships, like maybe people wanted, I don't know, like brown-haired bad kids more before this came live, but after this goes live, then um, you know, people want these hidden traits that like no one really cared about before. And just the fact that there's like a lot of room to grow into without making any promises, and just there's this culture of like, hey, we're brutally honest here, we don't really care what you think, we just like these things, and we're not going to promise you we're going to build any games, we're not going to partner with Nike or anything. It's just very organic and just looks nice. I like it.
Yeah, I like it too. I mean, I've got a couple. I mean, I'm not like super into it. I had kind of forgot that I had them for a while.
I forgive you.
Yeah. And then when everybody started, like a couple of months ago, I guess, like everybody started using them as their profile picture, I was like, I'll play this game too. And then I started playing with Stable Diffusion, and then that was it. Yeah. Yeah. So I want to talk about. Let's talk about Keplr a little bit. You guys are just crushing it, I think, in terms of. You know what I really love about Keplr is the mobile experience. I think, like, to be honest, I think the desktop extension, like could use some refining, and a lot of that has to do with just how I don't know, like when you have different accounts and like and then you also have like the different networks and everything. But I think the mobile version like really crushes it. And one of the things that I just fucking love about the mobile version is it works with Ledger, like over Bluetooth. And I once like tweeted, I was on a plane and I was like, compounding my staking rewards with my Ledger. Like I took a picture of it, and, like, it's like Keplr on the phone, and like Ledger retweeted it, and got like hundreds of retweets. And because no other wallet does this. I mean, not that I know of. Like, I mean, like I don't know of any Ethereum wallet that really supports Ledger really well over Bluetooth. And then the other cool thing about it, and this ties into another topic that I want to talk about, which is, I don't really know how to describe it, but it's, well, let's put it like this. So, in Keplr, there's like some curated applications, I would say, that you guys link to, and that enable users to utilize Keplr applications or Cosmos applications on their phone. In the ETH world, it's a bit different. Like Wallet Connect is broadly kind of adopted across all the applications. People use whatever wallet they want. I think this is really where we should be heading. And, this kind of, come with your own wallet, use in the application world. But it feels very like AOL like, you come into this interface, right? This kind of browser, and you're presented with a bunch of applications that are curated or vetted by the app. And it got me thinking: is crypto kind of wallet first, or is it blockchain first? And by that I mean, what is the canonical thing that people are interacting with? Are they interacting with a wallet, or are they interacting with a blockchain? And I guess this would become more like this question, because right now, like, wallets are very much kind of tied to one blockchain. But as interoperability becomes better, and people are less aware of whatever underlying settlement layer they're using, it feels like the wallet is kind of the point of entry. And then the question becomes like, how do you differentiate from other wallets? How do you make money? do these things just become commoditized like browsers? And then there's like the whole question of business model. So that's kind of a long-winded way to ask you, like, how do you see like the future of the wallet business? Yeah.
Yeah. I think the short answer is, obviously I don't exactly know, but the longer, more interesting answer is I think we'll see a lot of different kinds of wallets. I think, so just as a context, I'm personally not a developer. I, happened to make a wallet because I just enjoyed making products that was I wanted to create work on a blockchain product that felt as close to the user as possible. And um, the wallet is like the closest you can get to a user, right? And um, yeah, and then but traditionally the wallet experience sucks because everything in crypto is built from the blockchain and down, right? So you have people who are building like the consensus and the consensus algorithm, the consensus software, the state machine, and then the smart contracts, and then the libraries, and then you have the wallet. So it's like at the end of this crazy funnel, and every step of the way, you have had decisions made for you by someone else who isn't creating a wallet. And I think that's fundamentally why the crypto experience sucks, right? And you see a lot of Web2 people who are basically always saying it's like, oh, the crypto like wallet experience is terrible. Like, I can't believe crypto is like a $3 billion, I don't know, like $1 trillion industry that still hasn't fixed this. And as soon as they try to make a wallet, they realize it's like, oh, holy shit, there's like so much legacy standards that you can't just like get rid of in a day because first of all, you can't just like call the CEO of blockchain and be like, hey, can we get rid of like the mnemonic seed? Like you can't. And you also have applications who are like kind of, autonomously doing different things and adopting different standards, right? So I think first of all, I think that's one kind of context that gets missed out very frequently. Um, and then
Yeah, I think
secondly, yeah,
I think that has a lot to do with standards, and I always go back to like late 2000s. I was a web developer. I did a lot of PHP, MySQL websites, and also did front end. And like back then, you had to build websites that worked for IE6, IE7, and Firefox, and like whatever other browser your customer
yeah,
wanted you to be compatible with. And because largely there was very little compatibility between browsers, and that over time, evolved through better standards. And now, you can go on any website and it works on mobile and it works on desktop. And like as a developer, the risk that, your CSS code and HTML code is not going to display the same in every browser is fairly low. What do you think is the importance of like creating standards in the industry? Because I think the web very quickly, after, like even in the 90s, I think like the W3C was already creating standards. We don't really have such an organization in crypto that addresses the entire industry. Like, sure, there's standards being built within the Cosmos ecosystem, and there's standards being built within Ethereum and maybe within Solana and whatever. But like, there's not cross ecosystem standards that I'm aware of that are really being led by, powerful or strong ecosystem players.
Mhm. Um, I think there has been very traditionally this desire of, the core developers decide on a standard and then the wallet adopt it. I think we're, especially in the context of like application specific chains, um, like fundamentally, Keplr can't keep up with custom code of 1,000 different blockchains. Like that's just not possible. And that's why I subscribe to this more of this like mesh model where, you know, I think it's more of a bottom up approach where, it's like, hey, do most of our users think this is an important feature that they would need? And sometimes that, because of the realistic like resources limitations and things like that, you just have to say it's like, oh, we can't support this like very custom thing that you guys have built, and we choose not to, for various reasons. That being said, assuming a very efficient market, you're going to see other competitors pop up, and maybe you see that kind of what seemed to be a non-conventional, bespoke, not relevant idea take off, and that wallet will also take off. So I think we're going to see kind of this like interface, like ecosystem was within an ecosystem where like in Ethereum you just have one wallet that can handle all of the applications. I just don't think that's possible in the world of an application specific interchain moving forward. So one of the easiest ways to solve that is, I think, first of all, the extension or the signer. Basically, I think people get this like misnomer of like the wallet as like the extension, sort of the mobile wallet, and then there's this like web component to it, and all of it is sort of mixed up. But I'm talking specifically about the extension, and I think the extension will have to remain extremely simple. A lot of these applications that are application logic, like sending, staking, voting, viewing NFTs, selling, all of that, I think, should be abstracted away. Like the future, like the extension is where the moat of users are today. That's not going to be the case, like, many years down the road. And I think that's, we will see what, like browsers were kind of the hot things back in the day. But today it's like, like you mentioned, like you can sort of access any browsers with through hey, it's like if a browser doesn't support YouTube today, like that's their own death sentence, right? But you want this to happen sort of organically, not like a top-down system. And I would say that like wallets sort of have this decision maker seat in deciding what standard works and doesn't. And I would say many wallets, not just like us or just one specific wallet.
I'll push back on that. There is one example of a browser stopping support of a very used thing that a lot of people were using, and that is Flash. And so Safari stopped supporting Flash on mobile, and everybody was doing video with Flash back then, and then that just pushed the industry towards open standards, which I mean ended up being like I think great. I mean,
great for the ecosystem. But I remember when people gave Apple so much shit because they didn't support Flash in their like 3GS, right? Like,
yeah. So. I mean, I started building websites with Flash, in the like late 90s as a teenager, and so to me, like that was a huge blow to this thing that was an entire industry, like building Flash websites. Like, I mean, like the kids today don't know Flash, but people who are maybe like, like just kind of in their early 20s probably like haven't interacted with Flash a whole lot. But yeah, it was a huge part of the web for a while. Yeah, I mean, I'm still trying to like also wrap my head, I think, around. I mean, constantly, this is constantly evolving, but yeah, I think the signer is like a core component, right? And like that needs to be somewhat interoperable with anything. And to some extent, like Ledger has kind of figured that out, right? Like they figured out a way to just have this very abstracted signing mechanism that like supports many different curves, and there is some amount of app building that you need to do there, but it's quite lightweight, and you can have it be also like on the side, like you can have SDKs for teams to build their own integrations and such. But yeah, the business model there is, well, what is the business model over the long term? If you're selling hardware, that's one thing. If you're if you're a piece of software, it's something else. I think one interesting thing that I think will, where there's a business and where there's really a business to be, kind of explored is the MPC model and the threshold signature model, and being a service provider that provides a trusted sort of counterparty threshold, and then that sets up your whole threshold signature setup so that you can have a backup and recovery and this kind of thing. I'm a big fan of Zengo, and I think like they're probably one of the best wallet experiences. Unfortunately, they don't support Cosmos yet, and they don't like. Like they're not focused on that ecosystem so much. But in terms of the UX around, creating a wallet and having a high security self custody solution, like I think you could build a business around that. I'm curious if, on that side, the 12, 24 word mnemonic, what's the, for Keplr, like, how are you guys thinking about making it easier for people to onboard and get away from this mnemonic paradigm?
Yeah, so this is actually the very thing that I sort of I've been thinking about for the past like 6 months or so. And not a lot of people think that like Keplr is basically like ran by the Osmosis team, but like Keplr actually predates the launch of Osmosis, and we sort of have a team that like exclusively works on Keplr. And I happen to be working on both projects, but it's like there is kind of this like level of independence and autonomy. That being said, like moving forward, the way we see the future of like crypto UX going, I think you basically can't separate out the blockchain development from the actual like user software development. And what I mean by that is like, like Vitalik and all these Ethereum people are starting to talk about account abstractions on Ethereum. That being said, like, what's the biggest hurdle to getting
Sorry,
good?
Can you just remind us what is account abstraction?
Yeah, so it's like on Ethereum, you sort of have this like very hard line between, hey, do you have an externally owned account or a contract account? So it's like a mnemonic based private key based like public key address, or you have something like Argent, where you have a smart contract wallet, right? And those two feel very exclusive to each other, and there's kind of a very hard boundaries of what one can do, what the other can't. And I think from what I understand, you're trying to kind of merge some of the good things between those two things. That being said, when you're building on this like general platform, it's like Argent pushed the boundaries at the time when it launched. I remember being mind blown because the UX was so good, right? You could set up a lot of these things, but they could only do it within the confines of a smart contract. And I think the worst part about Argent was not the UX, was not the product. It was just fundamentally that it costs so much money to send money or do anything through Argent because you're doing a smart contract call. And so that's the bad side of things. Now, could Argent
and losing all your Pope NFTs because you sent them to an Argent address and they're not supported?
Yeah, you couldn't claim it. Yeah, a lot of the
which is what
airdrops,
happened to me.
Exactly. Yeah, I remember that as well. I think actually, I think I got my Uniswap one, but I think I lost a lot of other ones.
Yeah, I mean, I think technically there is a way to do it, but it just costs a ton of gas, and it's just like
So that being said, like, what is the right way of fixing this? Is like, why can't Argent just be part of the blockchain core dev and help define what an account is for that blockchain? But like I mentioned earlier, there's so many legacy and standards. So that's why I think I think app chains are so interesting because like, hey, we feel like one of the things that I talked with Dave on Osmosis a lot was like, how can we do account abstractions on Cosmos or specifically Osmosis? And it's like, hey, as long as there is kind of this consensus between a wallet and the blockchain itself, you can actually do like anything goes on like what an account is, right? So what we thought was like, we already have Taurus that like you can create crypto wallets just by logging into your Google account. And I think us like using that, like, massive props to the Web3 auth now, the Taurus team for bringing that to crypto, because like anytime I try to help create a wallet for someone new, like all of them just use that feature, right? That being said, is that is that the right way to store crypto? I would say most OGs say that's not the case. You should probably have it in a ledger. Now, there's pretty hard boundaries between those.
You lose access to your email address. You also lose access to your funds. And I've helped onboard people, and certainly like have led people down this path of Taurus, because like, what's the chances you're going to lose access to your Gmail account? Like, how often does that happen? If you're just
and you're sort of kind of inheriting the security features of that Google has built around making sure that some guy that's trying to log in from like South Africa when you've only logged in from Korea, like, that's why there's that, like, hey, what was your first car, or like, is this you from your phone, like, so you're sort of inheriting that. But why can't you have both worlds, right? Like, why can't you start your crypto journey with your Gmail account or your Twitter account, let's say, and then as you start spending, more money, storing more things, you sort of are able to attach more keys to this account. So it's no longer that like your account is an address, basically a public key of your private key that you generated with Gmail. It's sort of like, with this key, you're creating, I don't know, Dogemos on this blockchain, right? And you start, with maybe one key of just this Taurus account, but you can sort of like later add your extension signer, extension. You can sort of attach your mobile key. You can attach a ledger, and then you can programmatically set like, hey, for things that will cost less than $10, like, don't even bother asking me if I want to approve, or for things that are over $1,000, maybe I should approve it from my phone. For things more than $10,000, then yeah, I should probably get my ledger out and things like that. But kind of removing this idea that like account is always tied to a private key or a mnemonic, and basically just like putting the center of an account as like your identity, like your pseudonymous identity on the blockchain, and then your keys, you sort of have multiple keys that you can control different parts of your account. And assuming like when there's going to be a name service later, like when you log in with, when you create your first crypto account, it would just be like, hey, sign in with Twitter, and you basically get a name service. You also get a private key, and you're ready to go. And you can also maybe just set like 10 different people on Twitter that you sort of trust as your recovery key without even their permission, because you already follow them on Twitter or whatever. So it's like,
which is what Argent does.
Exactly,
yeah,
but
I've had to recover.
Problem with Argent is you have to know their addresses or their names, right? So it's like, hey, why can't that just be Twitter?
Yeah, using some existing social graph, I think, like, certainly is desirable. Often I think the issue there that you run into is that the social graph, using Twitter implies that like Twitter has some amount of control, or at least can censor you unintentionally by deleting your account or suspending your account. That certainly happened to me, where I've had accounts suspended, and sometimes it just happens out of nowhere. And the way that, look, I was just talking to Sam from Journal du Coin the other day, and he was telling me about how I think he's in here actually, by the way. He was telling me that like their channel with like 100,000 followers on YouTube was suspended because, well, he suspects during a live stream, like, they were shitting on XRP or something like that.
Someone reported it,
and then a bunch of people reported it once, and then their account was suspended, and there was like very little recourse. Thankfully they were able to recover. But this sort of thing happens all the time, like where you get 4 or 5 people reporting for whatever reason, and then all of a sudden your account's suspended, or even worse, deleted, and then you're like don't have access anymore. So like it's easy to target people, and I think like I think being able to from the get-go, or very early, being able to attach different accounts or different signers, right, is probably desirable. And one of those signers could be your phone. Like, I think it would be pretty trivial for Apple and other device manufacturers to start supporting these curves and having those signers like really just built into like those trusted execution environments that we all use to log in and do a bunch of shit. I mean, that to me feels like kind of the future. And then if they already have like all the recovery and everything kind of like built into the system, I mean, I think the issue there is that it's so abstracted and also closed source that you have little visibility into what access or what backdoors they might have. I think that's the real issue. Yeah, it's a hard problem, man. It's really.
But that's
not
the
easy.
thing is I think, on Ethereum, because you need to find social consensus amongst, hundreds of different dApps, hundreds of different wallets. Like it's just so hard to push like a fundamentally different change. Whereas, if you have an app chain that has an app specific wallet,
Hmm.
you can actually just do a lot of like crazy shit like at the chain level, like where you don't
Yeah, but
have a
who wants
recovery
20
thing.
wallets?
Well, I mean, that's the
Yeah.
thing is I think that's why, but assuming there's kind of this like very close knit community of people who only use that, and maybe the standard is something that other people can adopt. But like I have this idea that like you shouldn't block launching a revolutionary new feature just because someone else felt like they didn't want to use it. Like you push things forward and you allow anyone else to use it, like, as they wish. But, I feel like the way you kind of move the needle is like you ship something, people start using, you gain traction, and everyone else is like, can I also do that? And you're like, absolutely. All you have to do is just like, I don't know, use this modified auth module on the Cosmos SDK. Um, Rather than saying, it's like the the way it's been done previously, it's like these wallet developers go to the core developers, let's say,
Hmm.
Cosmos SDK. It's like, hey, we would like to change the auth module, and like, can we please do this? And then, and then you have this entire RFP process, like you have this entire process of like examining the specifications, like how does this break, some other like bespoke blockchain's implementation of the auth module and things like that. And then you have someone implement it, and then you get a bunch of chains to upgrade, and then once enough chains have upgraded, you sort of push this to the wallet level. I'm basically just saying I think the best part about Cosmos is you get to throw this entire process out the window and just be like, hey, we feel like we have a new auth module that's just like way better fundamentally from like the crypto experience, because a lot of UX issues in crypto are things that like are derived from the blockchain itself, not from the client side software, to be honest. And
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you're able to sort of just like get this adopted and have a wallet that supports it, that also has a decent amount of users, um, and then you allow anyone else to also take that and use it for their wallet. That's kind of how you make breakthrough changes in UX rather than waiting for this like entire EIP process, because that's the entire point of like heterogeneous blockchains, right? Like we don't have a standard, and that's why we're so messy. But you
Yeah.
also get to move a lot faster.
But I mean, like, look, I always like to bring it back to like this web analogy. Like websites are heterogeneous.
Mm-hmm.
They leverage the same technology. There are standards that allow us to interface with them. Um, I guess where it gets messy is when websites have to talk to each other, and then you need
Mm-hmm.
like APIs essentially, and then there's a
Mm-hmm.
whole industry of services that allow different APIs to talk to each other, and so you're talking about things like Zapier and make.com and like all this kind of no code stuff. Is this where is this where we're gonna head also with crypto, where you know things are heterogeneous, however standardized for common interfaces, but we're going to need some kind of interoperability layer that um, bridges the gap between the different app chains and calls, like basically blockchain calls that they support.
Um,
Does that overlap perfectly, or am I missing something?
I would say, in like considering that like crypto is still in its infancy, I think there's a good chance that once something's like a new feature sort of ends up a standard by beating all the competition. So there's room for that, obviously. If there happens to be valid reasons to use, you know, pros and cons of each, and there's decent amount of traction on both, then you're gonna end up with, you know, middleware that helps you bridge the gaps between the two. Um, but yeah, I do fundamentally think that like the crypto ecosystem is gonna look more fragmented before it's standardized, like way more
Mm.
moving into the future. And I think that's actually a very good thing where you like I'm personally just really interested in building like thesis driven products, even if that means like sometimes you sort of have to leave, you know, like you spend less time convincing people and you're just kind of like showing you an example of, hey, this is what things could be like. And then, once they're convinced after they're using it, I'm happy to kind of like have that conversation. Uh, but I just feel like trying to create mass adoption through trying to convince everyone to use your standard is like the worst way of getting mass adoption. You just create something that people will use, a lot of people start using it, and then because it's been proven in the market, everyone else sort of adopts that as well. And in that process, maybe some chains get preferential treatment over the others.
Mm.
But if that's also a good thing, right? Where you leave gaps in the market for new competitors to rise, and it doesn't mean that you're always going to be right. And that like iPhone example, when that came out, people are like, oh, because this doesn't support Flash, this will, like iPhone will never take off because Flash was such a major part of the web back then. But it
Yeah.
turns out that like, even though they like, they started off as this like very minority, small, opinion at the time, they fundamentally changed how like the mobile web experience feels like today. And you
I
want
mean, the
more
whole web
fragmented.
experience. I mean, there was so much
Exactly.
Flash on the on the web, man. Like it was
Yeah,
everywhere.
and tell me about it. Where like I use Korean websites where it's like littered with active X's and like Flash, and if you don't use Internet Explorer 8 on your Windows 11 machine, then you can't get work done. So like I'm still stuck in this legacy world, but fundamentally, if people demand it, they will. Even governments will change, maybe just not as quickly as we would like them to. But I think it's the same with wallets. It's going to be the same with libraries, blockchain technologies, consensus, and it's just going to be a very competitive market. And I think that's you want more competition, and you get more competition by initially fragmenting off into highly thesis driven products that are more specific rather than trying to aim for like the least common denominator. Like that just feels like
Mm.
the most boring product ever.
Yeah. I mean, like web standards, man, they really did propel, like, I think a lot of usage of the web. I mean, I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about this lately, and it's like trying to map how, um, basically trying to like look in 2007, like 15 years ago, we had Flash, we had, um, like most websites were not using HTTPS.
Mm-hmm.
Remember 2007, like most websites did not use HTTPS. Maybe you did for when you went to a payment portal or something like that, um, but it wasn't standard. Um, there were very few web standards, so we still had like a bunch of browsers that didn't work
Mm-hmm.
properly or like didn't follow web standards. And what happened? Well, like Microsoft decided, okay, we're going to adopt web standards, and we're going to adopt the standards of like Firefox, and well, basically Firefox was really um, adhering to at the time, which was the Web3 standards. Google, through just sheer power, decided, hey, when you don't have an HTTPS website, we're going to throw up a big red flag, and
Yeah.
that forced the entire industry to move to HTTPS. And then Apple um, decided that like Flash was not, as a closed source proprietary technology, was not the technology that we should be using to do video. And then beyond that, there's like tons of other user experience issues that were solved, I think, through some form of standardization. There's still proprietary stuff, like
Mhm.
when you like copy something on your phone and your iPhone, and you paste it on your computer, that's not using open standards. That's using proprietary technology. And it would be great if all these things were open standardized. You can't do that with like a Mac and an Android device without
Mhm.
using some piece of software. Um, but like open standards did a lot, I think. And in that time frame, like we doubled the amount of people on the internet. Like 30% of the world was on the internet in 2007. And I mean, still on 60% now, but like 60% of the world are on the internet now. So I think standardization did do a lot to uh, to help grow use of the web, and it's a lot less fragmented. I feel like it's a lot less fragmented now than it was back then.
Mm-hmm. But at the same time, for every case there was, a big company that got a new thing to be a standard through the sheer force of, the amount of user money, power that they had. There was a lot of cases where that also failed, right? So like fundamentally, I think what becomes a standard also sort of relies on, it's like, yeah, you can sort of kind of nudge things in the right direction using money, using your, product, using your user base, I don't know, like integration amongst your ecosystem. But at the same time, if people feel like it does a shitty job, like I feel like people won't use it, and there will be another competing standard waiting to kind of take that place, right? And
Yeah.
maybe sometimes that's an open thing where it's not controlled by one company, and I think that actually reflects more of like the crypto experience, because there's less of like patents and portability of anything between one blockchain, like between two wallets. It's like way lighter than, like I can't go from YouTube Music to Spotify. Whereas like, if I don't like this wallet, I can move to a new wallet. And if this wallet happens to do a better job of what I tend to use the crypto like blockchain wallets for, then like, yeah, I think that's actually absolutely how the crypto, standardization happens, through like massive competition and just like people going for niche markets and pushing barriers for what, at the time could be unpopular. But, if it's unpopular and bad, then you lose. If it's unpopular and and it's good, then you win, right? And
Yeah.
I love that part about crypto. It's just completely open. Anyone's up for grabs. So yeah.
Yeah, like wallet portability is, I think, like a great thing. Like it's great that we have that, um, and to me, it feels a lot like how email is portable.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to really move your email box from like one to another, you can. Like the SMTP will allow you to do that
Yeah.
using a client. Like you can. I've done that a few times and still works. That's not the case with messaging apps, though. Like messaging apps did not adopt any standards, and like Ben Thompson talks about this, and he talks about how there could have been a standard. Like if you look at email, well, email uses SMTP as a standard. Email clients and email providers have built all this added feature sets on top of it, but fundamentally it still uses the standard. You can always just go back to the standard. Messaging apps could have used like SMS or whatever as a fallback standard, and then build all kinds of functionality on top of it. So you could have had like encrypted messages through SMS or whatever, but still fundamentally use like an open standard. But they didn't, and you could like it's interesting to see how like two of the main communications mediums that we have today went like two very different routes in terms of standardization.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I find
and SMS
very,
is a
very
great
interesting.
example of, like rather than spending time to, like, I mean, there were attempts to upgrade like the SMS for phones for such a long time, but like
Yeah,
all the stakeholders, like the telecom companies, like the network, equipment manufacturers, the phone manufacturer, like all had different interests. So like, you know, some messenger company basically just like in Korea, everyone uses Kakao. And I feel like the reason why it took off was because it had cute emojis that you couldn't send over SMS, and people used to charge you on a per message basis, whereas messengers didn't,
yeah,
and they built a
yeah,
moat around that, right? And it's like, you know, it's unfortunate that they couldn't, it's like they don't open source, like, they don't open portability, but like that's not in their interest. So it's like it's a very like prisoner's dilemma thing where like if everyone sort of agrees to each other in this ideal world, obviously we just love if SMS was like messaging was just way better. But um at the same time, like could you imagine like using SMS for like 5 more years, like no emojis for 10 years because people couldn't come to consensus on what the right standard is, and like um and then you're gonna get this like tick and talk of like standardization, completely proprietary, and then some shit blows up and people start kind of moving off into this like, all right, let's create a standard around this, and then so it's always a balancing act, I think.
Hmm. Yeah, this is really interesting. I'm really enjoying this conversation. I think that examining how technologies evolve and like looking back on it always just seems very obvious. And like for me, for crypto, like the story is still being written.
Mhm.
So I'm really looking forward to having this conversation again in 10 years.
Exactly.
And,
Yeah.
let's put that in our calendars.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, in terms of what people are building right now, I feel like we're at a point right now where we're going into, obviously, like there is a bear market right now that will probably last for some time, may get worse. We're not going to speculate on market cap or prices here, but I think it's safe to say that we're going into a winter. And typically in the past, when we've gone through these winters, and this will be my third one, we've focused on building infrastructure and building tooling. Do you think that this is what will happen over the next months and years? Do you think that there will be a big push towards infrastructure and tooling? And um, or what is your feeling about like what people will be are going to be building now for the foreseeable future?
um I think people will still build more applications than infrastructure and tooling, just because well, let me take that back actually. I think I guess I have no clue. In the last cycle, I guess a lot of people built infra and tooling. Also, just extremely hard to monetize those things, I feel like,
Yeah,
other than crazy high valuations in the bull market or
yeah,
very good macro cycle. Um, Not sure what that looks like for this part. That being said, like I feel like what kicked off like that last bull market was basically like Yam and like like DeFi Summer, and like
yeah,
like it wasn't these like infrastructure and tooling companies and teams that like kicked off like the bull cycle. Like obviously there were a lot of things that had to go right with the macro economy and everything, like COVID stimulus money, whatever. But at the same time, it was like Yam and like synthetics and DJ Spartan shilling all his, Thorchain stuff. And like there's a lot of things, fundamentally it's applications that get people excited. And I always have this in the back of my mind where like, um, wallets only succeed if there are compelling applications. So I'd love to see more of that. I think, you know, maybe I'm a little bit biased here, but I'm hoping to kind of build some of these compelling applications on Osmosis, mostly because it's where I get to, you know, have the most fun building and have a lot of opinions on the directionality and yeah, get to ship the fastest.
hmm. What are you most excited about right now? Just
I am
cosmos, osmosis, or just like generally in life?
I am currently extremely excited about how wallets evolve into more of this like identity layer for the
Hmm.
blockchain, reputation layer. Traditionally, everyone's been focused on DIDs in the context of how do we store government, credential information so you can use it on the blockchain. But like I feel like no one has kind of thought enough about like, hey, can pseudonymous like identities have reputation and credibility? And I would say absolutely yes. And can you do that on a purely on-chain data? And traditionally, I think I would have said no, but we're increasingly moving to a world where that's starting to become a yes, because people are using blockchains more and more today. And yeah, I think wallets that leverage this part will be interesting. And there are many interactions on the blockchains where it would be 10x the fun if there was a social element. I don't think building a social graph from the bottom up, like it's like, hey, let's create a new Twitter, from the bottom up, like on the blockchain. I find value in the things that people who are doing that, but for me, it's just like, hey, what if staking needs, like troll boxes? or token gated groups based on delegations, or you have avatars that you with items that you earn based on what you did a year ago, or so I think there's a lot of kind of like small fun element. Like there's a lot of room for fun in crypto, and I think that fundamentally relies on the identity and the social part. um, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a mathematician, so I don't get really excited about new capital efficient curve models and you know DeFi models, but I feel like you could basically create the exact you could 10x the usage of crypto by having zero improvements in all that we've built, by just
Yeah.
leveraging more of the social and the fun parts.
Yeah. Make crypto fun again. It's a good note to
Yeah,
end on, I think. Yeah.
yeah,
So last question. Who should come on this podcast next?
that's a great question. I need to figure out who hasn't been on here. To be honest, I think.
Who would you
Uh,
love to see? I mean, I'll tell you if they've been on before, but
I'd love to see Sasha from Haifa on
okay.
here.
Yeah.
I think he has a very interesting take on kind of community, social graphs, governance, and things like
Okay.
that. Uh, I don't know. I always end up liking his tweets a lot, and feel like there's a lot of things that I relate to in the way that he says it, and I'd love to see that. So yeah, maybe.
All right. Might that's a good recommendation. I like that a lot. Yeah. And he's also got a bad kid, so yeah,
Yeah.
makes sense. Great. Well, Josh, thanks. This has been great. Really,
Yeah.
really glad we had you on, and interesting to get your thoughts. And yeah, let's do it again in 10 years, and let's make a bet. Let's
Figure
make
out
a
who
bet
won.
about the
Yeah,
standards.
yeah. Nice.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Take care.
And to our listeners, thanks so much for tuning in. We do live streams every Thursday. Make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell and the like button to get notified when I go live every week. And you can follow me on Twitter. I'm Seb 3.0, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.